I don't know.
It was more likely to drive through probably. I was thinking like for maybe business for Alba or for whatnot, possibly if the road was better, it might bring a few more up. So that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't.
I know we use that road a lot.
Yeah.
And this whole shut off has been a pain for us to get through.
If you floated the idea of turning a blacktop road anywhere near Rochester back to Fresh Rock, how do you think that'd go over?
Yeah.
Or especially a highway?
Well, there's an agenda behind it.
Mm-hmm.
It's honestly pretty simple. If you look at the high cost of what gravel roads really are, and having to clean the ditches out more often and all the stuff that gravel creates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Back in its day, when we had little cars and little tires and not many people driving around,
Thank you.
not a bad idea.
James, would you be interested in saying that?
What's running up and down these roads now? Well, ain't that. Big truck, big tractor. I mean, the case in point is, look at Wisconsin. They figured it out.
Yeah.
You know, the road over there, I think it's hard because all the erosion and all the issues. Western Minnesota, a little bit different. Flat, not a whole lot of erosion, you know. Not as traveled.
It has even more implications to the taxpayer who lives in the area and uses it because their vehicle gets beat up, suspension gets beat up, the dust gets sucked into the different filters. Like I can't get gas to go in my truck tank when you fill, and my visitors have told me it's because of the dust on your Fresh Rock Road. And yeah, okay. Anyhow, you'll pay for that later. So, I mean, it's a hot, as a taxpayer, it's like a double penalty. You're paying the same taxes as everyone else, but you're not getting the same service.
What highway is this?
From Alba going north, they're about half done peeling out the surface on it now. I just came that way this morning. They're about half done. And I'm saying we want to put back the way it was before the peel the surface off.
Is that on right now?
Yes, on.
Is Matt coming?
Yeah.
I thought he was, but I know that he was missing the Winlack appointment or meeting because of a doctor's appointment. And I thought he said, I'll see you on Thursday, so I,
7 past, so we'll call the meeting order.
okay.
All right, any public comments? Any public comments? Any public comments? Hearing none, we'll move forward. 3 minutes, June 17th, 2021. Discussion. You have a second?
Second.
Motion made by Bob, second by Lynn. Approve the meeting minutes. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Is that for both meeting minutes?
That was just number 3.
Okay.
We'll do July 15th, the special meeting. I apologize. I went off the last email that she sent me and there was a time change on it. So I jumped on the meeting at 9:30 because that's what the time said. And there's nobody there. And I'm going, what the heck's going on?
Well, I know.
And I
you
looked
sent
back
out-
at my email and it was right there, 9:30. So I'm like, well, she changed it.
And I went
Big
back
deal.
to my email and it said 8:30, so I just wonder if, sometimes when it gets converted, if,
Yeah,
I-
yeah, I'll show you. It said
Yeah.
right there, 9:30.
I believe you.
I was
there's
on
funny
it.
things that happen with those.
So then I went back 2 emails ago and I'm like, well, there it says 8:30. This one says 9:30. So
Yeah.
I guess you and I put all that time into getting that ready and I wasn't even on it, so I apologize. But we need a motion to approve that special meeting minutes.
Second.
Steve moves, second by Lynn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Second.
Opposed, motion carries. Agenda, any discussion?
We need to add one item on the agenda under the 319 Whitewater non-point source grant update. We need to add a number 3 to approve a cost share payment for a structure that was in Olmsted County for that was being paid for under that grant.
All right, any objection to adding line item 3 under 8B?
I move to approve the amended agenda.
Second.
Motion made and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approved consent items. That was Steve and Bob, by the way. Any discussion on the consent items?
Oh, the bills payable are under, I passed an amended one out, and I sent one out yesterday, but this is the correct one that I put on your desk. I forgot to add one of the payments in the one that I sent out. That was number 3129, unroot cover copy. And most of the payments are related to the 319 non-point source grant that was approved at the last meeting. And this is the one that has a very, very short timeline to spend before it's done. And so total funds paying out for today at $55,233.
So,
I was wondering what the road cover crossing
Yeah,
was.
same here.
Okay, that was under the 319 nitrogen reduction grant. We have funds available for field days that are related to soil health and cover cropping. I should take this out so I can talk. And so anyway, that's tied in with Lance Plessig organized a cover cropping soil health field day, and that was last Tuesday. 240 people attended. It was phenomenal. So anyway, that was to cover, that was funding that I had available for field day events to help set up, and so that pays for tables and chair rentals and what else?
Did our board discuss that?
This is under the nitrogen reduction grant, which the board approved. And within that grant are funds available for field days.
Yeah, and it was a great success and well worthwhile, and I would have definitely voted to approve it. I feel like our board should have discussed it and approved it before the money would just be spent.
Did you go to it?
I didn't go to it,
Okay.
no. But, I was at the SWCD meeting where they discussed it the day after. So I think it was well worthwhile, and in hindsight, I would have approved it, but $2,711, I feel like that's this job's board to discuss and approve those things.
Yeah, well, I had when Lance approached me, he says, we got this field day going on, can you support it? And I said, well, I do have funding just
And I
for
would've.
that item, yes.
Yeah, in hindsight, I would have.
Yeah,
yeah, and just, I do get it. It does cause concern of, I agree. I mean, I would definitely support it too. We just gotta make sure that, I think the big thing, I guess, would be for people like Lance that put these things together is to make sure they understand we only operate every other month. And
yeah.
you need to
And
get
he
to us a
approached
little
me after
sooner.
the last meeting, so
Need to
that
get
was
to us a
great.
little bit sooner so that we can look at
Mhm.
some of these things so that we are not making administrative decisions outside of the
Yeah.
scope of the board.
Yeah, and in light of that too, I've got funding in this same grant for more field days, and just to FYI, put that out there, Angela White wants to do something during the winter time, and so she's over at Olmsted SWCD.
Okay.
Yeah, and she does a lot of their cover cropping, technical support and outreach, and then also with Martin Morrison. They're the two that work with the landowners in Olmsted County for the covered property contracts. So that's something that she emailed me about this past week. So just letting you know that that's coming down the pike too.
Yes, I think, you know, just part of that, because they're obviously contacting you, the way to avoid that in the future is just to make sure that everybody knows we're gonna meet twice every
Right.
month.
Right.
So if you wanna get in on this, you're gonna have to make sure you're proactive. And
Yeah.
you can avoid that.
Yeah. And I think in Lance's situation, he was planning for 100, and then the RSVP started coming in, and they were well over 100, and so then it was trying to fill that funding gap.
That could have even been added to our emergency meeting.
I didn't know about it at our emergency meeting. It was after that time. Yes. That was the point, though.
Certainly try to improve it in the future, but yeah, everybody's been kind of rushed with all these things, roller crimper and whatever, but I actually went to it and really some interesting information, even though I'm not in dairying anymore. There's a farm in Wisconsin that uses all alternative forages because they had like a complete alfalfa kill about 3 years ago, and they're still getting 95, 96 pounds a day, and it's just pretty amazing in certain circumstances. That could be a great option.
The real issue with that is talking with different people, and it's not that alfalfa is bad, it just became uneasy. And what happened is the industry kind of adapted around it. So the dairy nutrition industry actually is the one that kind of pushes that, because if you don't have somebody that knows how to balance the diets with alternative forages and really understand carbohydrates and et cetera, the old way of doing things for many, many years was alfalfa, corn, commodities, added together, and depending on how the corn and silage and alfalfa turned out, that regulated this side. That's what it was. As soon as you introduce grass or alternatives, it just throws the whole thing off.
Opens the door to new skills, though.
It does, but the problem is they don't know it. The balancers aren't even designed for it. In fact, when they send tests in, you actually have to say what's in it, because they test differently according to what it is. Percentages, how much grass, how much this, how much that. So it adds a whole layer of complexity to it that I'm going to say mainstream ag right now is beginning to adapt, but we really saw a lot of pressure against it back in the mid-2000s, coming out of high point salaries, low fiber diets, burning cows up and stuff like that, trying to push them up. So it is adapting more. Economically, I don't see alfalfa going away though. So, you know, if you can't get alfalfa to grow, or you're prone to winter kill or something like that, there's something else going on with your farm. But for some people, they haven't identified that, so they go down this road and they say, well, this is what we're going to do. Is it probably the most economical thing for him to do? No. He's got a bigger issue going on that could be fixed, and he can introduce that back in. He's not the first guy I've seen do that.
Yeah,
So-
back and farm and so forth too, but that's fine.
Yeah, but you see we're going to that, and that's why the industry doesn't follow that, because they don't know how to feed it. You know, and I say that very loosely. I'm not saying there's bad people. I'm just saying that that's what we tend to see. So,
From the environmental perspective, at least to see that it's working for someone. If other people had a rocky farm or a rough farm that wasn't good for alfalfa, why certainly that would help them to maybe look into it. So that's the point.
you think of the rocky farm, you want to drastically minimize tillage and things like that.
Right.
You know, so. Yeah. Okay. Any other?
I was just wondering, for this field day thing, did that get sent out as email or?
It was advertised, I
I don't know.
believe, in the paper and on Facebook, and I'm not sure what other venues or ways that it was promoted, but I know it was on the SWCD website. So, and I know he sent it out to, I know Lance has a big following on Facebook, and there were people from 5 states in attendance.
Is that down in Iowa?
No, this was,
Winona County.
yeah, Winona County. And I know I met some people that, some farmers from the Watertown, Wisconsin area. And so they were there as a group. And Ed McNamara was there. He's at Goodhue SWCD. He's one of their supervisors and a big cover crop proponent in the region. Trying to think of who else was there. A lot of people from Olmsted there.
Okay, any other discussion on the consent agendas or consent items? Hearing none, I have a motion in a second.
So, okay.
I wasn't 100% sure. Motion made by James, second by Bob. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Okay, motion approved. Board reports. Lynn?
I don't think I really have anything too much worth mentioning, so.
Pretty quiet in Washoe County as well. Working on budgets.
Keep going around the clock, I guess. Yeah, we had that. I was not able to make it to that. I did 100 cover crop deals before, and sometimes they're really well attended, sometimes they're not very well attended. This one, fortunately, was attended. So that's good. I don't think anything else we really got going on. We're still looking for a district manager. We're in that process. We did have a candidate. They decided to open it back up till September 1st. Wanda is acting as our interim district manager. She's doing a better job than what she thinks, I think. So she doesn't give herself enough credit. But yeah, otherwise it's been kind of business as usual. For the most part, so those are probably the big ones we got going on. So, that's it.
Yeah, we're spending a lot of time dealing with building their jail, talking about masks. Not probably germane to this board, but Bob, I'm going to ask you, has your county board discussed trying to mandate masks county-wide or anything on that order, or
No,
come before your board?
shortly after their August second, third meeting, the public health director and the administrator discussed it, and the mask mandate was put in place for county buildings. Tuesday's meeting was on the agenda to approve the reverse, and we did reverse it, giving people the option in the county buildings.
Okay,
That's where
it's at now?
That's where we're at now, and, it's
Okay.
fine to follow CDC guidelines, but until it's mandated somewhere else, we're just gonna try and give people the option.
Okay, good to know. Then the other thing, our board approved the Healthy Lake Winona grant, and Josh, I mentioned this at the SWC meeting, we can step out for a minute. In that I did talk to, or in that agreement, I saw that part of the plan is to put alum in the water, and I asked them to reach out to the Winona County SWCD for input and advice. They have as the kind of water jurisdiction within Winona County. I wanted them to maybe include Winona County SWCD in some of their what they're moving forward with there for looking for expertise and advice. But I know you had concerns about adding one kind of chemical. The problem is too many chemicals and pollutants in the water, and so we're going to put another one in. So I don't
It's all one problem created.
Yeah. But I thought you might want to be aware that that's going on. I don't know if Sheila will have anything more on Healthy Lake Winona.
Just that,
I don't know how you can call it healthy like one of them, dumping a can. I mean,
It doesn't make any sense.
That's a dream.
yeah, John Howard put together that application and I submitted it for him, as the city is not eligible unless they have a sponsor. You know, it's because the city doesn't have a water plan, but the county does, so that we're eligible to apply on their behalf. And that's exactly how Bowser words it in their RFP, that cities are allowed to apply if a county does it on their behalf. So John put that together. I know he did reference alum treatments, but this particular application was not for alum treatments. It was for some stormwater infiltration to treat before the water, to get the phosphorus out before the water goes into the lake. Also to do some treatment through diverting into this wetland area so that the wetland could naturally filter phosphorus out before it re-enters the lake. So those two pieces. And then he also put in there, I think, some funding for studying the carp populations. And to try and understand, what the age of the average carp is, and, so trying to get a handle on that. Because the carp are bottom feeders. Any alum treatments, any dredging, or anything like that that's done for the existing phosphorus in the lake, the legacy phosphorus, the carp messes it up because they're bottom feeders and they're always agitating what's at the floor of the lake. So there are things that cannot be done until the carp is addressed. And it was not fully addressed in that assessment report. We kind of left it open saying, hey, we need to study this more. And so I was hoping that Winona State, Neil Mundal would be able to help, although I hear he's retiring, if not soon, he has. But it would have been nice to get some Winona State input, because they have studied the carp, but of course it's not in the same thresholds that the state requires to have for a carp study.
so what is the issue just the algae?
Yes, ultimately, yes.
I mean, is that
Yes.
but they've got to throw this health thing underneath of it to say the algae's coming because
Because
what's
we
not
have
healthy?
phosphorus.
But what's not healthy?
Doesn't meet the drinkable, swimmable.
Yeah. It
So
doesn't
it doesn't
meet
meet the
water
swimmable?
quality, it doesn't meet water quality standards, and I think for Lake Winona, it's recreational suitability.
Okay.
So algae is a big part of that.
Okay.
So
So it's a
is-
rather significant grant, it's like $725,000 plus the city's gonna throw in.
That's including the matches. I think he
No,
was
it's $785 with the matches.
with the match,
Yeah.
yes.
So is
But-
it a, what are they monitoring to say that it doesn't meet the standards? Is it, what parameters, what things do they check the box in? Do you know?
They do phosphorus, total phosphorus, TSS, which is total suspended solids.
Yep, but that
Um,
just means dirty.
Right, right.
Yeah,
But
that could be
phosphorus
a
leads,
piece of paper.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, so it's
Yeah.
almost
And then we
irrelevant.
do, there's chloride, hardness.
That is-
Hardness based on calcium carbonate.
Yeah, which
and-
is irrelevant. Okay,
Well, it kind of ties in there. And,
but that's just in that can be a degradation through limestone carrying out.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
of
there's
course.
nothing bad about calcium carbonate.
right,
I-
we all have it, but,
I got a pocket full of it right there.
yep.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just swimming that all day long.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to figure out what's the true problem. Is it phosphorus? Because TSS, that could be anything. Chloride, that's salt.
Right,
Hardness is irrelevant because it's due to the percentage of iron typically. and it's only based on pH. So I could.
pH is another one we do.
Right, but these things are all affecting that because calcium carbonate is a high pH, chloride is a high pH, phosphorus is typically a lower pH. So depending on what it's attached to. So and then total solids, the river would never make it, none of that would ever make it, and streams don't make it. Because
And it's treated through Bowler's Lake, what comes through
right.
the watershed.
So I'm just so it really I mean, and I'm just objectively looking at this thing. What's the true problem? You know, the true problem is algae appearance, but we're picking on these other things.
Well-
Okay, so
Phosphorus itself is the measurable quality, the measurable parameter that they measure. So it's impaired, it has a TMDL for high phosphorus.
right, which
So-
phosphorus is great. We all need it. You know, and you could swim in phosphorus and stuff.
Yeah, if they could take it out of the lake and put it on my field, that'd be fine.
Yeah. So, but at the end of the day, you know, there's been a standard set that actually is half of what it used to be because they said it was bad in water and it can stimulate problems. So phosphorus in itself is a necessary nutrient. So what it really is what we have a system put into play that's out of whack, probably because of the runoff from the streets and chlorides and whatever else that people are using. There's no fossil on fertilizer anymore, so where's that coming from, right? So we know there's probably some erosion and different things coming into there. So I question, so this is why I asked the question, is the problem the health of it? Is it any different than any other waters, or is the problem the aesthetics of it? And I'm going to probably go with the aesthetics a little bit more than the phos because it's producing algae. However, there's a whole background to this where I'm going with this. Is there a way to treat this biologically? And I don't mean biotech, I mean biologically versus chemically. Is here going with this? Now, the problem is that the biological aspect may take a little bit longer than the instant, let's dump another nutrient in chemically, make a chemical reaction, solve the problem for right now, but as soon as more of it goes in, you've got a whole new problem again. And you're just gonna keep doing it, and eventually you're gonna get this layer at the bottom. So I wonder, because I know some things out here that biologically might help treat some of these things, that maybe could be worth exploring before we go down this road. I'm just telling. So the issue becomes there may not be as quick of a reaction as dumping another chemical in it, right? We stop the algae, but long term this might be the better way to go. And there are some things that are pretty fast too, so I don't know.
Yeah, all the pieces are, and I did read in that packet the application of alum, so, I mean, I don't know, you're saying maybe not at this point, but I mean, that was part of what I read in the packet. But the pieces kind of seem disjointed how they fit together with, Sheila, you're the Winona County water planner, you sit on this board, we've got the soil and water district over here who seems to be completely divorced from this large, expensive project that's going on within our county, and I would just like those pieces to be, I mean, you look offended right now, Sheila. I'm just looking at you that I'm not trying to offend you. I'm just saying I wish these pieces fit together better. And I'm just, as a elected official, trying to, make sure all the different, left hand knows what the right hand's doing. So to
Yeah,
speak.
and I'm just looking at it trying to really come down and define what do they call healthy. You know what I mean? What's healthy? A lot of times it's just
Yeah.
a scab term to make people feel good about doing something, but at the end of the day, what is it? Let's really deduce down what the parameters that they put into play and say, okay, what's the real issue for this giant sediment pond that you now want
Yeah.
to turn into this recreational area that it was never designed to be when it was constructed? And is there a better way? I don't want my kids in there swimming and dump a bunch of chemical in there. You know what I mean? I would never want that. I don't understand. If you're trying to make something healthy, why would you go do something not healthy? You know? So I just, I come at it with a different perspective.
So that took a long time. That's some of the stuff that went on.
I'll do a little research on that, Sheila, by the way. So, I know some things that would potentially happen.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not too much. A couple well sealings, basin contract extension, which sounds like it's the same person as this thing.
Yes, yes, and well, that's on the, what have we added to the agenda?
All right. And also, SWCD contributed to the LiDAR expenses for the county. Because we figured that we're using plenty of that product that the surveys are producing, so it's only appropriate to make a little contribution to that. And also bumped the per diem up to 75.
On to number 8, board discussion and action items. A, financial update.
Okay, for our finances, at the end of June, our checking and money market balances came to $88,712, and it was virtually the same, $88,715. We received some money, and then another extra check was cashed from the previous month. So that's the balance at the end of July. So nothing big happening. We do have a couple of deposits that should be coming any day from the surface water assessment grant, almost $10,000, and then the nitrogen reduction grant of $5,400. So those are not yet reflected in these financials.
Any discussion? Not, we'll move on to B, 319 Whitewater non-point source grant update.
One, I gotta interrupt you, Josh, I'm
Okay.
sorry. We do have the 2020 audit, Peterson Company Ltd. management letter that needs to be signed by 2 of our board members. And so then, once this is complete, then they'll provide the audit.
So is that it needs a signature, do you need a motion to actually do that, or is that actually just
I guess we can ask for a motion on that,
what,
just to be sure.
and that is just verifying? What
It's
is
a
that?
statement. They prepare the letter for us, so I have to put, when I get it, I just put our letterhead on the top. And so I've been told not to change the date. It's July 19th when she sent it out. And just basically stating that we have fulfilled our responsibilities, and, you know, that we believe we're acting in a financially prudent manner, and that we appreciate them, the auditor, reviewing our records.
I think it's probably a motion of the deal to approve that
I
website.
move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Steve, second by Bob, to approve the 2020 audited management letter. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Nay, motion carries. Anything else, Sheila, on that? And you've got a copy for us to sign? Or
Yes, I
Copy
do.
in here.
Yep.
You want me to with this now?
Oh, you want it now?
Yeah, he wants to sign it now. Who else?
Probably Lynn is the vice chair. right?
Yeah. That would work.
Who's
Lynn.
Review of funds, this 319 Whitewater non-point source grant update, review of funds spent to date.
Okay, just to kind of review very quickly what's been going on. We approved this at the last meeting, and first of all, I just want to relay a very, very big thank you to the SWCDs that were working with us on this. All of them, when we found out about the possibility of getting some funds, and I emailed Daryl and Terry and Skip, and I said, if we get some money, what do we need to spend it on? And, I mean, there was we had a couple conference calls, a lot of emails back and forth. We came up with a wish list, and then Emily said, well, this is your limit, let's prioritize. So then we prioritized, and she submitted, and we got it. So that worked out very well, and I'm very pleased with all the help and support. I just can't say enough, because it was a big task to move this much money that quickly.
What was the total, what was the number?
The total amount received, that we are eligible to receive, is $47,046.
But it was blocked off where you couldn't just go spend it all.
Right,
So
the
we had to
a limit
figure out-
on equipment was
Right.
$5,000 and per piece of equipment. And so what had happened is, so those are the funds that we had, and then the SWCDs have some match to in-kind match and cash match, and Winona County was paying for the scales, and so anyway, the things that have happened to date, as of yesterday, we have Olmsted SWCD purchased the lysimeter equipment, and now they are renting a trencher, and we'll be installing the lysimeter, so that all will be on the in-kind match. So that is done. And then also Wabasha SWCD purchased elevation survey application subscription to be used on a drone, and this will really save a lot of time for their staff to do some of the technical pieces associated with structural practices. So that was purchased and is done. And let's see, and then the structural practice, that is done, and that is also on our agenda. We thought, oh gosh, it'd be nice to get some structural practices in here. And it just so happened that there was an individual that had land in Olmsted County that was doing a grade stay rehab, and what they were getting from other sources didn't get them quite up to 75%, but this did. And weather worked out that they were able to get it done. That was the one I was sweating bullets on. Can they get this done before, and it was, I think, completed last week. So that has been done. The spreader, manure spreader calibrations, the ones that have been used in Winona County are almost 30 years old and keep breaking down and are just a hassle. So this grant was able to pay $5,000 towards the cost of that. The actual cost was $9,000. So the remaining funds were taken out of the Winona County feedlot funding to pay for that. And what's really nice about the calibration scales is this one has some safety features that you don't have to be right up underneath it to do the measurements. You can stand back and you have do it on your smartphone. So that I thought was a really nice safety
So
feature.
there's meters on the, like, where it's injected manure, or how is it?
No,
I mean, I can't imagine
it's
a way of
the-
meter.
The manure spreader should
You
be,
mean like a dry pack
Wait.
manure meter spreader?
Oh, do they put pads under the wheels yet? Is that
Yes,
what you're talking
yep.
Scales.
yeah, so there's scales, it goes up
Yeah.
into the
This is
wheels.
not like an injection.
No,
This is what I can show you.
and they make very good rate dry box.
This is the
But you
quote
gotta
that we
have
got.
this figure to figure out how to do it.
This is the quote that we got, and
Yeah.
it shows where they go underneath the wheels, and then there's, this is the part that's the,
So it's weighing how much it's put in.
yep,
Weigh the whole spreader, and then when you haul it out, because I went through the deal,
yeah,
measure the area that you hauled it on, and then you know how much manure, weigh the spreader back.
right,
And you were just talking about, it sends a signal to something now instead of looking right at the thing is the only difference as far
Right.
as that goes.
yeah.
And
And,
you have to kind of make some assumptions on how close you're driving, one
Well,
swap to
the
the
spreader is
next.
supposed to have like a pattern,
Yeah.
and they don't measure way out to the fringe, it's
Sure.
good average between that outer
The real problem is,
splits.
the real problem is.
I didn't know they were trying to measure it that way.
Well, that
I
is
just read the narrative.
recommended,
If you got a manure management plan,
you have to use it.
then you're supposed to follow that, keep track of all your spreader loads in the
Yeah.
future. If you change spreaders, you have to have that one re-weighed for its capacity.
The problem with it is it makes the assumption that your manure is always going to be the same.
Yeah.
And that's where it goes wrong, because it's not. So,
Can't quite hear you that.
There's so many variables on a Peter spreader.
well, I said, the problem with it is there's a little bit of a natural assumption that your manure is always going to be the same.
Yeah.
It's not. So,
It's better for blending pits than like my situation where some is dry and some is water.
And I can see where an injecting, out of a tanker or through a hose, I can see where they could meter that pretty accurately, but meter spreaders, I don't know where.
No, that's true. I'm sure it is, but
it's still better than nothing.
Yep. And
Some type
it's-
of accountability.
Yep.
Okay.
So-
Anything else you?
So there was that, and then there was the purchase of a roller crimper. As it turned out, Wabasha County SWC made the purchase. Lance, after we put this together, it was discovered that, with everything happening, the original price that Lance had for a roller crimper was $6,500, and then they became a lot more expensive, at least $11,000 to $18,000 for a new one. And Lance, with his connections, was able to find somebody, I think they were in South Dakota, who had a roller crimper that was 18 months old. And so, he was able to get the price for $6,000, including shipping. And so Wabasha County SWC made the purchase, and $5,000 of that is being paid for by the grant. And I know Terry Peters is working right now. We've been working on a contract agreement for the landowners when they use them, to try and, a lot of the SWCs that do have equipment like this have some kind of agreement that's signed by the landowner when they check it out and they rent it.
Lance had a simple one drawn up for a rough idea, but I think we've somewhat agreed just through talking so far that it's better to have a contract that's more professionally done to cover all the situations. And give you a little more background, I guess, because I spent like 4 or 5 hours researching and looking at the website and talking to Lance and sending emails because I was trying to decide if we really should do it or not. But this one's a 3-point hitch mounted 15 foot 5 inches I and J. There's another one that John Deere sells, it's Indec or something or whatever the name is, but that one's like 20 grand new. But the one that we actually got is 11 grand new out of a place in Pennsylvania. So we're still maybe gonna have to round up a trailer or something like that. Could be easily lifted onto like a big tractor loader. So there's,
So who's going to do all that?
yeah, that's the thing. I mean, all that, I thought it's worth a try. We'll get it in the area. Some of my neighbors are even interested, thought maybe we'd coordinate our efforts if we get it in the area at the same time and try it. But hopefully we can find a reasonably cheap trailer or borrow someone's, hopefully, or whatever. And then where they're gonna keep it is another thing, because I worried maybe Wabasha County farmers wouldn't have much access to it if it was kept somewhere in Winona County. And now, what was Lance saying, even here, like in this area, Whitewater or something?
Yeah, I don't know.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of variables, that's
Mhm.
true.
Definitely.
But at least it gives a machine to someone that's hardcore enough to want to try it, probably go through the bother to get it, we're hoping.
Well, so we have plenty of room, so it might be something that,
So anyway, we'll worry about that later. That was what
Maybe
Lance was
we
trying to
can
tell me,
always-
because we're in this rush again to
Yeah,
get it done.
we can help out.
And the cost was, $5,000 less than a new one.
Mhm.
So it's been used.
Technology on a 3-point hitch couldn't be, you couldn't put it on a loader and load your planter behind, so that you're going the same, always going the same direction. I
Some
can't-
people do that with,
But with this model, could that be done? I can't, it's not set up for that, right?
I don't know if it's omnidirectional or not. Some people have front 3 points, you know,
Yeah.
and that could possibly be used, but I don't know for sure. But people use a lot of places where it's like countries that maybe don't use herbicide. I mean, it's surprisingly, it's been going for like 20, 25 years, the actual machines use. But it's very limited, I think, in this area. You'd have to have like lakeside crops to get your rye in quick enough to get a big enough growth, or corn silage, or possibly small grain, and then follow with that. So it's maybe more for organic people, but there's a little bit of room there, I think, for people with corn silage or canning crops. So
When you plant, you have to plant the same direction as the script, right? You have to.
I don't know if you necessarily do. I mean,
You try to
Because
plant.
some sort of
If it was
diagonal
laid down
spot.
this way and you tried to plant this way, wouldn't that be problematic?
If your openings are good enough cutting. The other thing is, Mike Zalman, my cousin, I never knew it, and then I heard it at the field day too. You actually can roller crimp after you plant your beans in the rye, and then roller crimp. So that's probably something I would be interested in trying. Because where we went to the field day, I think they only had one application of Roundup and no other herbicide, and had pretty good weed control just because it mashes everything down. So that's the goal, I guess, is to minimize herbicide use and have that cover. So
The flip side that's coming, so on the way down, I literally had to cut the guy off at the top of the hill. But, you know, you get in these areas where white mold is a big issue, and that's where this doesn't work, because it just traps in too much moisture, and it just blockades that whole scenario. So there's gotta be places where this works and places where it doesn't work. And that's one thing is I think we educate people that having this big biomass is make sure you understand your fields, because there are some things that can, this is nothing new, this has been out for 20-some years, it's really great. I mean, it's just finally making another comeback. So we do already know some of the problems with having large biomass out in a monoculture, because it isn't all fairy tales and unicorns coming out of there. There's some other issues that can present itself. So the economics of it is making sure we understand that, you know, what we're doing, what to look for, because again, in my world, it's all about making sure, you know, the farmers or landowners are productive. They're you know, making money. That's the whole point. That's
You're
their
not
job.
just experimenting.
Not just experimenting, but also not just going out blindly saying, this is the greatest thing ever. You know, it was having real discussions and saying, hey, by the way, there are some risks to this. And so I think that's something we got to make sure as we promote things like roller crimping, that we're having those conversations with people and saying, hey, and ask some pertinent questions. You know, they will find out. Because the worst thing that will happen is if you don't make them aware of it and it happens, they will never touch that again. Ever. And they'll tell their kids and their grandkids and everybody around that this was a failure, and the fastest way to make something good for
Yeah,
you.
if you have a crop loss when you're thinking of something dry.
And that's what happened the last time this came around in the early 2000s, was there was a lot of failures, and that's why it went away. And when it was away long enough, now all of a sudden we're looking at it again, and you know, that's what we have to be careful of. So. Yeah, roller crimping's been around. I remember a lot of guys makeshifting, making them, you know, trying to make it work. And they weren't actually getting it done with the race farms. They weren't getting things crimped. And it was the onset of the early organic movement that was being pushed, and some of the people that just never even went into mainstream ag. So I saw a lot of old roller crimpers out back, you know, I should say a lot, but a few roller crimpers that were homemade sitting back in the root barn, you know, that they tried to go do it and didn't quite get it. Even cover cropping had a ton of failures when it first started to come out, and most of it was timing based. And it's why it fell off, And then we kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and now it's starting to make its comeback. So we've seen both of these cycle twice. I just hope this time around we get it right. I think the cover crops are by far ahead of this biomass weed control movement, which is really what this is. But what you're going to see next is getting rid of this biomass, the problems it creates with nutrient tie-up, right, which is an allelopathic effect. This is, I always find this funny because I've had these conversations about 5 years these things finally started to come to head, and that's 20 years of doing this. But what you're going to see is nutrient tie-up, and what eventually it's coming. In fact, yesterday I was just down by Illinois to another conference looking at like degraders for cover crops, ethylene, just some things you guys might be interested in because these are not all organic, but they're pretty close to it. There's just some stabilizer things, but like ethylene mitigation in crops under stress, nutrient tie-up from cover crops that happens for a short period of time, especially in these large biomass crops. How do we get that broke back down? Stop degradation, removing through a more natural way, getting them broke down very, very quickly to avoid disease and insects, which is ultimately not feeding the beast that you're trying to create. So there's some really neat things coming out. You just have to be careful. Yeah.
I heard from Andy Trottabush that someone had planted beans in rye, and then when fall came, plugged the combine, all the biomass and all that, and I walked out my beans that were planted in rye this tall, and then I sprayed Roundup later when they were like this tall. And I mean, there's not even that much down there now that it would even be a problem. So I guess my question is, do you think
There's the problem in itself.
what?
There's the problem in
More
itself.
sterile soil that things don't.
Yeah. They want to write one book, tell everybody to follow it, and it's going to fit maybe 20% of people that are actually doing it. The other 80% get upset because it didn't work for them and they never touch it. That is the and I'm being very honest with you, put it on record, that is the problem with boards and people farming in offices that are making these decisions, going out and saying, here, go do this, and your farm's different than his farm, and then they wonder why the capture rate and percentage rate, because somebody sitting in an office that's some warrior on the computer says, well, I read this, or I saw this, or I saw this article, and this is the way you need to do it, and no-till and cover crops, and that's the only way. It doesn't fit everybody.
So it's a difference in the
Well,
soil.
and the
It's a difference in
the
farming.
changeover, like you say,
soils, and that's the issue, is that it's why we can't write one book and make everybody follow it, because it's not the same for everybody. Where your soils are at, the types of soils, the conditions, the weather patterns, the rainfall amounts, all those things come into play. That's conducive to the success rate of trying these alternative practices. And that is where it becomes a problem when we think that we have one system that's going to work for everybody, because it doesn't. That's why I fight the no-till preaching all the time, because it's not going to be beneficial for everybody. You've got to earn some rights to reduce some of those things to get to that point, because there's some people that don't have their soil, and their soil might be very tight and hard and tender crust, and that shuts off oxygen, and shuts off root development, and what happens? They have a crop failure. So you think they're going to ever go back to no-till or minimize tillage? Never. So they need to get out
They'll
there.
probably
and do
never
something.
have better soil though either if they don't try to.
I'm not saying not to try, but if you come out and say this is the only way to do it, and
Sure,
then
they
they'll
wanna do
put
the
all their
works.
economics into one bet. See, this is the problem. You want to promote it and say it worked for me, so it must work for everybody. Do you know what South Dakota soil's like? Do you know what southern Iowa soil's like? How about Missouri? How about southern Illinois versus northern Illinois? You know what they call the northern Illinois guys? Seed casters. They just throw seed out and grows corn. You've been out in south, central, and southern Illinois, it's a whole different world. But we want to throw them all in a box. And the reality of it is that that's what's happening even with this, is we've got advocates out here that say this is what should be done. And they don't understand the differences in all those soils and the differences in the farming practices. And it's the part that I am actively fighting, that we don't come up as people sitting behind desks or in offices or on the internet or whatever it is, and begin to come out and say, this works for one, it should work for all. Because it doesn't. And I even see the farmers jumping on that bandwagon because they might have had something successful on their farm. It may not work on their farm until we figure out the parameters and the variables to make it successful. And that is the real problem, is running around preaching this is the only way to do it.
Or initially successful, like 1, 2, or 3 years, but then what happens after?
You get it.
You know, I'm a
Yes.
couple years in the no-till, and I'm wondering, well, what happens after 5, 6, 7, 8 years where I'm not mixing the nutrients up and down, then I'm putting them all on the same, you know, so, or the same with cover crops. It's like first couple of years, hey, awesome. 3, 4, 5 years down the road, now you've got this biomass on top. So, I mean, you just don't know. There's
Yes.
different soils, different.
And how things degrade.
If
and
you
break
don't have
down.
rotation, that could be a problem possibly too.
Yep,
Yeah.
rotation, types, amount of biomass, you know, what you have, you know, how much stock you're taking off, the recycling of nutrients. Every soil breaks down different, everything has a different, I mean, we have some little thing called CEC, cation exchange capacity, higher and lower numbers, it's gonna react differently for everybody. And so what we wanna do is we wanna funnel this thing down into one little system, because it's easy to talk about, and easy to manage from right here. But the reality of it is that doesn't work.
That's kind of been done in the past sometimes with the co-ops, I think.
Oh, they have, and it's why they've tried to funnel it down, but it's why partially, I'm not saying that it was even intentionally, maybe we could go up to a very high corporate level and say it was intentionally, but, you know, I believe that the people of the co-ops or any business for the most part have the farmer's interest in mind, but they just might not know. How do they know what they don't know?
Well,
This
and
is what they would like to believe.
They want to do the most tried, true, and proven thing. And
It's like the
they
dairy
know
nutrition.
what's happened over the last 40 years, what they've been doing.
Right.
And these other things are like fear the unknown. And they're afraid to recommend something that, you know, we know this has worked for 40 years and you'll get this result if you continue to
Right.
do that.
So what I spent the last 2 days doing is looking at actually how do we mitigate or alleviate the need for all this phosphorus? How do we recycle nutrients better? And what can we do to get that structure working? What can we do to take organic nitrogen and convert it to ammoniated inorganic nitrogen forms? There's biological sets that are very specific to that we can do a better job of utilizing the nitrogen that's already there, that's tied up in this organic form, coming out of this biomass, right? Even manure. Why don't we just go put 60,000 gallons of manure on it? Everybody grows 500 bushel corn. Doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because it actually throws the soil out of balance. And you've got ammoniated, non-ammoniated forms of nitrogen that actually bog the soil down and don't allow that to be efficient, right? So there's so much more to this whole this thing that's coming out, and the reality is, so I don't want to get too far off topic, but what I'm saying is that I just want to make sure that when we go out and we start talking about these alternative cropping methods, roller crimping things, cover crops, and all these other things, we don't lose sight and focus that there are negative things that can happen, and we need to be very honest with that, because if we come in and say this is nothing but fairy tales and unicorns, this is the greatest way, you got to figure out how to get it on your farm. We saw that happen already, and it produces a very sour taste, and it will spread 10 times faster than if they have a success. And so I just want to make sure that we're not out beating one drum and saying this is the only drum to beat, and there's only one system of farming. And be careful with it. That's my word of advice. Having already gone through all this, I've gone through this whole thing with the roller pepper thing years ago, and then it just died off. And all of a sudden it's coming back. And so we can learn from those mistakes. So I've seen guys have absolute horrible failures in soybeans. I mean, failures. And I've seen guys do really well. So it comes down to practice if that's the route they want to go. So, and make sure they know that they could have a failure. Start small with the way to do it. So that's my message.
So then, next on the list was the cover crop billboards, and I could not get the printer to print color, but this is what it looks like in black and white. So we
Is
have
that number 2?
Well,
Or
no,
still-
we're
still on
still
board.
reviewing what was spent for the grant. And so this was worked on with, in cooperation with Angela, who helped with it, and Terry and Lance. And so that's what we have. It'll be on 5 billboards for 3.
They're already up?
Not yet.
Because this is, so that's, I thought that looks like a picture when it was up.
No, it'll be in color, actually.
Right. Well, they're not gonna be black and white?
Yeah.
Option 2 was your picture.
Oh,
Yeah. So anyway, that is done and spent. Cover crop videos, that was for purchasing or upgrading equipment. And Wabasha spent theirs, so there's about 3,600 remaining, well, yeah, 3,600 remaining in that $5,000 budget. And so that's all the things that were purchased to date that are done. The things that are outstanding are, and this leads into the action item, we have some soil health sampling equipment like soil probes, and Lance had come up with a list of tools for each of the SWCDs to use with outreach with farmers. They're $750. Haney soil test, that's $1,000. And then we have $3,600 remaining to be spent on videography equipment. And I put on everybody's place, this is from Skip. He sent me yesterday, and he went ahead and ordered these for $1,344. But this does not include shipping, so I'm not sure what shipping will be. So this is his list that he will use to apply towards the cost of video equipment. And also,
what's the video, what are we using the video equipment for?
interviewing farmers, taking pictures of, or videography for before and after pictures for different structural practices. Lance has been doing a lot of, I don't know if you've been on, SWCD has a link to some of his,
I've seen a lot of his videos,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
not in the last month, probably.
okay, yeah. So Lance would like to upgrade that, because he's a lot of problems with, when he's interviewing farmers with wind, that a lot of background noises and things like that. So I know he had a list of things, and he has not purchased those yet unless he's done that today.
What would you use a trail cam for? Is it a trial cam? or
Could
trail
have a
cam?
motion sensor deal, that's what. I thought
My
they were.
guess would be it'd probably give you like real-time video of you could set it to take a picture every 10 minutes or
Time
whatever.
lapsed. Yeah.
It's time lapse, so as you're doing a project, you can take a picture every half hour and show, you see those sped up as it comes into play. My guess is that might be what they're doing in waterproof. So that'd be my guess.
Yeah.
It's a time lapse scenario we're saying project.
Yep. Yep. And the Clip Champ video thing, that's actually a subscription that they have on some software that does like photoshopping type things. But so anyway, that was another.
It's oftentimes used as the processing side of all of this.
Right.
So by taking time lapse, taking live, taking this, and a lot of times you put that in, and that's how you come up with the video presentations oftentimes we watch. So outside of emails.
Yep.
I'm just gonna look at mine, don't
I'll draw you in. So I just
Well, Terry really
There's gonna be
wanted a
horns on
tractor
that,
in
isn't
there,
yeah.
but. Yeah, and then the other thing that's unspent yet are 3 sets of tabletop rain simulators. We have the rain, we can get access to the rain simulators that are with the big trailer. Well, there is a tabletop version of that. So those are the things that are unspent. So that kind of leads to the next discussion. We, according to the grant, any invoices for purchases of items need to be submitted to MPCA by September 15th. So that's obviously before our next board meeting. So,
Well, Sheila and I talked about this the
Yes.
other day, and I said, we really don't, she said, what do we do? And I said, we don't have much of an option. We have to bring it up and figure out. We almost have to pre-approve it within a certain amount or something. As long as we know what it's going towards, but we may not have specific numbers, let's say we can cap it or however the board looks at doing it. There's really no other way for us to do this unless we call another special meeting, which we have to meetings and all that happy crap. So I just thought this would be a better way to do it, is see if we can go through a consensus, come up with a number and pre-approve it.
and that amount is $8,066 for those 4 items that are yet unspent in the grant. And so those are the funds that we have to work with to purchase those. So that would be the limit.
What happens, so these, devices, where are they stored?
Where is what stored?
The device, these different devices, like the
Oh, well,
trail cam.
these would be at Olmsted SWCD. This is their list. Terry Peters purchased for Wabasha SWCD, and theirs is, I suppose they'll have theirs at their office, and I'm assuming, so each of the SWCDs
Okay.
has items, and I just think it's a great opportunity to be able to help them do the things that they're doing.
The only, and don't mean this facetiously by any means, because it's great to have these things. The only thing that I see that happens when you buy equipment, and this is from a business standpoint, is that, I'm not saying not to do this, but what ends up happening is when that equipment goes bad, all of a sudden, one need to replace this, and they replace that, and they replace this. And what it does, sitting in the mini budget committees, seems like I always saw it on the budget committees, all of a sudden your list goes longer of things you gotta maintain, replace, and fix, and whatnot else. So that's where,
It never goes away.
and then it never goes away, because we've always had.
The first one is free.
First one's free,
And then the
and then it's,
taxpayer.
well, we've always had a mic system, well, we've always had this, we've always had that. And then you find yourself spending taxpayers' dollars just to maintain a piece of equipment. And the biggest one is, it's outdated. It's probably the biggest one, it's outdated.
This kind of stuff outdates quickly.
Yeah, and it does, and so that's where, I'm not saying I'm gonna do this, but this is where it goes wrong. So I think more on a consensus, or on a basis of that thing right there, is to say, hey, this is sometimes why boards say no to things. Why
Yeah.
businesses say no to things.
Keep track of when you get the items too. Just brief thing. I was on the Playville School Board, and they somehow had extra money, and the superintendent wanted to get a new curtain for the stage, for the theater, and I said, well, we just got a new curtain like 7 or 8 years ago. Oh no, it's been like 30 years. And I said, no. So I went home and I had my stack of paper this high, and I spent like 3 hours, and finally I found it. Like 7 years before, we had spent $11,000, and now we're supposed to spend $14,000 for a new curtain. So crazy how that happens.
Yes,
Well, and that's part of the problem with the changeover on board of directors too, is, what one board knows and what happened before and why they did what they did. And then you've got this, and some are a little more conservative, some are a little more, open and liberal with the way they see funding. And so, yeah, it is something, because it's oftentimes the upfront cost is the easy part. It's the maintenance of that cost is what kills you. So I just want to make that point clear, because that's how I see things. When I look at this, I say, that's 4 more things now. Indefinitely, we're going to have to maintain. It will become the norm, and it'll say it's outdated, broke, lost, whatever it is. And we start looking at equipment like this, and this is why I argued pretty heavily on our auditing, that, we put this for the SWCD and Winona did, and I argue, I think it's the only time I ever voted down, was when we switched the audit to $5,000, because none of this stuff is economy. They only look at stuff over $5,000, and I said, how many things do we have that's over $5,000? Well, that's kind of normal. Well, for a city or municipality or business, probably. But you have to look at the majority of what you're working with. If the majority of what you're working with is less than $1,000, you better be auditing $1,000 or less, right?
Yeah.
So that is where the loss system comes into play and all these other things, because now it goes into the system. It's not even held accountable on an audit. It's just on a piece of paper, and it's as simple as on the computer going click, click. That never even existed.
And I think it's really beneficial too. That elevation program for the drone caught my attention earlier. I wonder if those measurements are allowed for the proper approvals or papers or things like that and all that, as to whether it pays or not. But I could see it would easily save man hours if that could really happen instead of going out there and surveying. So, I mean, got to analyze things, I guess, somehow. Someone does to
Yep.
know whether it's useful or not.
Well, and that's where I think, as long as boards, as we get this equipment for other SWCDs collectively, we're all sharing that in our different districts. But to be sure, like Steve questioning why the trail cam. If we get a trail cam, we'll always want a trail cam. Guaranteed that thing will get broke, lost, or stolen, and then we gotta go buy another one. And now it becomes part of the budget, and we begin to collectively take away from what we're trying to do with the taxpayers' dollars, which is improved. So, and we start putting the dollars towards a whole room full of neat things that we pull out every once in a while. So, that's just a statement, I guess. So, no, I like it. What are you gonna do? So any discussion, basically we're doing this blind a little bit so we can pre-approve the you say 8,066? That's what I wrote down. So what we would need is a motion for anticipated invoices capped at $8,066. We would need that motion to approve spending that money, correct? So there's a motion on the table to do that.
So,
Second.
Motion by Bob, second by, I'll give it to Lynn this time. To approve that, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
My question is on the logistics for, would it make sense? Well, Steve, you cannot sign on checks anymore, correct?
No.
Okay, all right. For sure I can grab you at the SWCD meeting for your signature.
Is that before the 50? Yeah, true.
Yes, it'll be on the 9th. So if,
So we need a second one.
well, I can sign,
Okay. That,
that would be the least confusing way.
if need be, I can run out something.
Yeah, okay.
so we do have our added number 3 here to the
Right,
recommended
yep. Number
rules of
3.
cost share payment,
Yep.
Hempstead County.
Yep, so this is one that, and I put a copy of this at everybody's place, Carol Bednar. She was able to get in and finish a project, and so we have the payment to approve for $7,076.15. And this will bring her cost share up to 75% for the grade stay rehab. The only thing that is, when I talked with Skip about it, the project's complete, it looks great. The only thing Skip said is it's coming to their board, their SWCD board, next Thursday, the 26th. So technically, the Olmsted SWCD board has to approve it, and then Whitewater makes the payment. So that particular check that I printed out actually has August 26th printed on the check, just to make sure that it fits. So we can approve it contingent on Olmsted SWCD approving the payment. And then that's how we'll move forward with that. Yeah, but Skip was very, particular about that technically, if this was a normal grant, it would go to their board, and then at the next regularly scheduled meeting, we would bring it to our board. But we don't have that luxury of time with this particular grant. So, that's all I have on that, so we can approve that as contingent on Homestead SWC approval.
So we just need a motion
Yep.
to approve that. Also move. Motion made by Steve, do we have a second? Second by Bob, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Office rent options.
Okay, at our last regular meeting, we had a discussion about rent with Winona County SWCD. And the board asked that it be tabled to discuss again today. And so anyway, talking with Kay, how we come forward with that. In her conversations with Ken Fritz, he said that, well, whatever Winona County SWC charges for rent, he says the county can match that. However, it will cost us a bit more because the office space at Lewiston currently, there's a lot of files there, there's a lot of equipment there. It needs to go somewhere, so what was provided was, and I got this from, or Kay got this from Pat Moga, there's a lease agreement that the county uses for rental space at another location. Steve, do you know where that is?
There's a Walls building, the W-A-L-Z Walls owns the building.
Okay, so is it a basement or?
I haven't been to the building. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, because that was kind of confusing to me, but anyway, the county right now pays $737.22 monthly for that storage space. So there would be the issue of moving things and then paying for a portion of that rental space. And I haven't been to it.
Let's wait till we have everyone here for me.
Okay.
Josh is fine.
Oh.
So we just take it. I think we can just break it a little bit.
Yeah.
Actually looked up who that Walls was that owned the building. It's like some car dealership guy from the past, but he's
Yeah.
older now.
Yeah.
I mean, just interesting to know the backstory.
This is Butch Walls, and then got the Butch Walls.
I can't recall. Just remember.
We just took a little break later.
Thank you. I thought they started bathrooms locked except for that one.
All right. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess I wasn't sure when you left through my, but we had the discussion last month, or last meeting, about rental space at Winona County SWCD, and which went up a bit, I think about $250. And so the board asked for it to be discussed at this meeting and to find out what options there were at Winona County. And Winona County had, in Kay's conversations with Ken Fritz, I wasn't able to get what the square foot charge is, but he said that he would match whatever Winona County SWCD charges. So that's for office, my existing space. However, there's a lot of things at the Lewiston office that needs to find another home, you know, and Kay's thought was, well, we'll have to put that in storage. And so the county already pays for a storage room. Like I said, I've not been there. The county pays $737.22 a month for that storage rental. And it's at 152 West 3rd Street.
Yeah, so, yeah, I had asked to bring this back. This meeting, because we're currently renting from Winona County and from Winona County SWCD, 2 different offices, and it's my opinion that it's unusual for any employee to have 2 offices but can only occupy one or the other, plus there's the travel time back and forth. So I did talk with Administrator Fritz from Winona County as well, and so here's his responses. Kay asked me what we would charge, and I said we'd match the SWCD per square foot price, so whatever you're paying you, we wouldn't charge anymore. And he said, I figured it would make the decision simpler for the Joint Powers Board. And it says we'd store and digitize the records at no cost, and it would reduce your travel time. So I think it makes sense to have her. And I think we learned something during this whole pandemic, that not only did we rent 2 offices, but wasn't in either one of them. So there, you know, the need for, I think it would be a more efficient use of the taxpayers' money, as long as her cubicle sits empty up in Winona County when she's not there, if she just would operate out of there.
Well, I just,
It'd be a loss of income for you.
it'd be a loss of income for us, but that's not, I look at just about everything collectively as taxpayer money.
Yeah.
Because I pay into that. And what's efficient? First of all, it's always hard to have these discussions when you have the person involved sitting in the room. I don't look at this as a shoe arms thing. I look at this as
The position.
The position. Is the position necessary to, I think 20 years ago, it was very necessary to probably have 2 locations because we didn't have communications. We probably didn't have a lot of the infrastructure put into place that we have today. I'm sure there's a lot of things that were shared knowledge, shared everything else, but that's all pretty well clickable and buttoned away. I don't want to lose the revenue for our board, but I can completely appreciate what you're saying. In this board, we all foot the bill. So, you know, for me, it's kind of a catch-22 because we lose the revenue. But I got to go back ultimately to how to use the taxpayer dollars efficiently. So obviously the SWCD for Winona, we actually bank on some of that money. That's part of our budget. But we can't look at it, and I have to do this the proper way. We can't look at it and say that we're going to make a facetious decision. And I'm just saying the way I see this. We can't make a facetious decision that's greedy towards us bringing in a revenue stream that isn't necessary. That's not good ethics in business, politics, nothing. So I guess that's my point, is that I'm not in this for the money. I'm in it because it's pretty hard to argue and Steve is saying.
We're eliminating your bill entirely and the travel time. She'll be able to use that travel time for, you know,
The position, not,
yeah, exactly, the position or
yeah.
in the future.
I have one question. I thought I heard the word basement mentioned for storage area, but.
I don't know. I
Yeah, I'm
don't.
not sure if it's.
So I was just wondering
It's
about safety for the documents and whatever. if it
No,
was
so,
going to-
yeah, we
Don't
we
file
recently
anything that's the
relocated.
80s, man.
We recently relocated from our old government center to our county office building, and files throughout the county. We eliminated things that were just tying up space that didn't need to be there, and we purchased or rented appropriate storage for all county documents, and that's where these documents would be going, or storage would be going.
So is there, I realize I mean, looking at if Sheila were to leave tomorrow and, put somebody else in this position, the need to be in Winona any more or less than being in Olmsted, any more or less than being in Wabasha.
Well, she's the Winona County planner, water planner, so we're gonna have that position
Right.
regardless.
But what I'm saying is the need to come up to the Lewiston SWCD
Oh, any different than,
go to Wabasha or Olmsted. We don't function as a board collectively as one, but we only operate out of one of the SWCDs. If somebody else were to come, if an efficiency expert were to come in, that'd be the first question they'd ask. I work with them. They're going to look at things and say, well, wait a minute, why Lewiston? Why do they have? And that is my question: is it necessary or is it nice? So, and again, this is cutting my own throat and it's part of our budget. Our budget's
Stan, do you have your new rental space? That was part of what precipitated this discussion. Was you were unclear of what was going to happen with your location. Is that all squared away at this point? Or?
Yeah, so our rent went up on top of that, and plus we're going to lose the revenue stream. But it can't be a factor as to this board subsidizing what our SWC does. That can't be done.
Well, I guess I'm a little confused here. Just what's your schedule? It sounds like, well, I don't know.
My schedule is depending on where I need to be. Yeah, so as the Winona County Water Planner, I have a desk at Winona. As the watershed coordinator, I also have a desk in Lewiston. I usually try and spend 2 days over in Lewiston during the week. But that can vary from week to week. Sometimes I'm there 4 days a week just because of what's happening, what I need to be working on. The computer at Lewiston has some archive files or databases that are not available from the computer in Winona. I can connect with what we call the W drive on both computers, but there's a drive that's at Lewiston that is not accessible at the Winona computer, and there's a drive of files that are not available to me at the Lewiston office that are in Winona. So they connect, but not.
Have you talked to Winona County IT department about resolving that for you?
That's a couple clicks of the mouse, and you could have that.
Yeah, so I don't know, it's, the SWC system is a little, they do get IT support from the county, but, and purchasing of new computers and everything comes through the county, but they do have their own system, and I don't know if that's because NRCS is present. I'm not sure how that all works. I'm just.
Yeah, I'm confident Winona County IT would.
Fix that.
Yeah.
Because that's actually, if there's files that you need that are on that system operating either way, that should be a Winona County.
Yeah, and she's employed by.
I just don't want to incur another expense.
You're employed by Winona County and Whitewater Twin Powers. You're not employed by Winona County SWCD, are you? So it makes as much sense for you to have that connection with Winona County SWCD as it would with Wabasha County or Homestead County.
Like I said, that's if an efficiency expert came in here, that's going to be the first question they ask is why specific to one location? Why not here? Why not here? Why not anywhere else? Well, it's probably because it's there. So then they're going to say validate the need for that, and they're going to say, well, computer files. They're going to say, well, that's 1, 2, 3. That's a $600 fix, and here we go. And it's really hard to argue Steve's point. As much as I like the connection with Sheila in our group, and I've talked, kind of backfed it off from Daryl, and there is probably a nice connection there. It's just hard to argue in today's world the physical need to be there versus this virtual world that we live in. It's not Sheila, it's the position. You know, is this position
And
necessary?
it-
That's what
Well,
it is.
isn't that getting into the whole argument of whether you can do everything remotely from home, or do you come back into the office?
And this argument's getting harder to make that we
Mhm.
need an office. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't even have an office anymore.
And it's not even that she needs the two spots, it's whenever she's not at the one spot, the taxpayer's paying for the other spot. And normally, the taxpayer is gonna, pay for it at the maximum one office for a government employee, much less two offices that they can't be on both of them to begin with. So we're giving her a full-time office, and we're not charging anymore. We're saving
Position.
all the money that's being spent, up to your rental right now. So, I mean,
Yeah, we're getting hit double
And it-
because
one
our
of the-
rates went up, and if we lose this, we lose again. But that, so I'm just saying, it's not something that I'm taking lightly on our budget.
from the constituency standpoint, it almost seems like it would be easier to contact Sheila if she was always in the same place, because she says her schedule varies and she doesn't know which place she's gonna be at. Well, here's her office. Here's her phone number, and if she's not there, she's in the field. So, it seems more streamlined.
So does the storage situation work for you? I mean, how often are you gonna need these files?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything about the storage room. Do I have to call somebody to be able to go access? I don't know.
But then you can't say you can digitize everything.
To digitize everything we can. I mean, that's been our policy.
Yeah.
We've tried to eliminate as many hard copies as we can, and I think he said no charge. I think I saw that in there.
Steve, do you know if in this storage room, how secure is that?
Yeah, it's secure enough for any document that the county has. So it's not, I mean, it's as good as it's at least as good as what we had when we had it in-house. Or we wouldn't have done it.
Okay.
Yeah, but I can't imagine that the SWCD has anything more private than all the information the county has. You know what I mean?
I've
It says,
had boxes.
it says we,
Well, what could, whose social security number do we have? No. You know, I mean, what good pertinent information?
here his words are, we'd store or digitize the records at no cost.
But how much more or less is it than sitting in the office?
And I think
I mean, there ain't a vault there. It's just a dang old root.
and like when
It's just a dang old root, you know? I mean,
And like when a person moves from one house to another, every time they move, they find out how much stuff they accumulated that they don't need. Between eliminating anything that's not needed and digitizing,
Yeah, I mean, maybe
So-
in a year, you would need that extra storage.
well, I mean, how big is your cubicle or your area now? It's 111 square feet at SWCD?
Yeah, that's, I think Daryl counted for 100 square feet for the office area. And then there was a proportion of the common areas, like the conference room,
Okay.
hallway, and so that's how they came up with that.
So
calculation.
where is your storage there then?
just a room.
Underneath the desk.
So I don't know how much more secure that is than anywhere else we can go.
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
There is
It doesn't sound like we're talking a lot of stuff that we're storing.
there is a large.
It's in a small cubicle at SWCD now.
Yep, and there's a large lateral file that has NRCS-related records. Let me see, four shelves high. It's a beast. I can't move it alone.
But okay, I don't think, it pains me to say this because I know against our budget, but this is, as a current spokesperson for this position, Sheila, storage is not going to be an issue, security is not going to be an issue. This really base is on, is it necessary to be in a physical location to do the job? Or is it just
Well,
necessary?
after COVID, probably not.
But even before COVID, was it just because that was when it was original, or was it necessary to do the job? doesn't make a difference whether we did it or not. I'm just being very, very, this is my business mind coming out. Was it ever actually necessary, or was it just the way it was, and COVID might have exposed that it wasn't? That's the key, because your job isn't any different today before or after COVID. There's nothing different, same job, right? So nothing changed, it just COVID proved that maybe it wasn't necessary. So I think in my position, I've got to look at this, and again, it cuts our own throat. But it's hard for me to argue having two places in a world where some people don't even have one. So my question really comes down to, is it necessary? And if so, I guess I'm gonna put it on you, Sheila. Describe to me beyond a shadow of a doubt how it is necessary to have two locations to perform the job. That's really what it boils down
Well, the one thing that would be missing would be the personal connections, and that, you know, I know.
to. Anybody arguing, working at home right now is gonna say the same thing. I don't get to see
Yep,
Larry or Sally because they don't
I
take
know.
lunch break with them. So.
yep,
So I really think that's what it boils down to, and that's what Steve's trying to say, and I just can't disagree with it. I can't find any reason to keep the income coming to us, because I'm gonna have to go back and explain this to our board and say, hey, we lost this revenue stream, and they're gonna say, well, why? And then you say, because I can't collectively come up with a reason necessarily a true need for a person to be here. So I'm confident.
I'll make the motion then that we move Sheila's position.
Physical
full-
location.
Physical.
Yeah, physical location.
Not
full-time.
Sheila's position.
Yeah.
We have to say our director's
Our
position.
director's location to full-time at Winona County.
We have a motion. Need a second.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Steve, seconded by Bob, to take our director's position and put it solely at Winona County. Any discussion?
I have just a question. When Ken Fritz said he would match per square foot, the question I have is, does that mean that Whitewater will pay for my entire office space footprint at Winona County? If that's the case, we need just a portion of my position is the Whitewater. So just a portion of my rental space should be attributed to the Whitewater. You see what I mean?
I asked him if you're there three days a week now. My question to him was, if you're there full-time, will we, in the space that you're in, would there be a change in charges, and we can continue to do it for the same price because it's going to sit empty?
So
We're not there.
So we actually won't have an expense to this now. So we actually alleviate expense for Whitewater.
Mm-hmm.
Winona County picks up the full tab.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. Whatever was going to you is eliminated from our budget. Plus her travel time is going to be, she'll have that, those are hours that the taxpayer's going to get. Instead of being on the road, she'll be at the office.
We have a motion in a second. Any other discussion?
I'm
I'm just
confused.
wondering about the travel time, and is that typically you just go from your house to your Winona office, and then
From Winona to
Lewiston?
Lewiston, it's 30 miles round trip, exactly.
Okay. So it's not like you're going directly to the Lewiston office?
No, I always stop in Winona. It's on the way. Then the other question I have is the contract or the rental agreement that was brought up at the last meeting. That was for the entire calendar year, 2021, starting in January.
So we want to just make it effective January 1st, so she's got that time to transition out of.
That's what I would say, so we could add that. Those are kind of some of the details.
Okay.
Makes
So
sense.
you're gonna have to remake a motion for January 1st if you wanted so to make a motion. You want to add that, the effectiveness. The details I'll follow and some of that we'll have to work out, but yeah, I think we should add a date to it.
Yeah, I'll amend that motion to include the date of January 1st, full-time at Winona County.
You still want to second it?
Let's do a second.
And Bob seconds that. Any other discussion?
I have one question, just to make sure I understand. So there's gonna be no additional charge for 5 days versus 3.
Mhm.
So then it's like, we get our position
For free.
for free. Now, is that gonna change, like, when things go over again? Is there anything in writing or something that our position is free?
Well,
So that's what I
it's
want.
never gonna be, I mean, there's always good change down the road. but-
So someone's gonna try to distribute out a percentage next time around,
But it
probably.
can't ever exceed what it actually is, so. In other words, it can't be charged for 7 days a
So
week.
it's not quite as rosy as it might appear, but still good. I mean, as far as no cost, because when January
It
1st
just
comes-
doesn't, the efficiency of moving around and, I mean, if somebody walked in here and said, this is the way I see it. I would never run a business that had 2 places. I'd kick them home. I would never. The position, I think, when it was intended, had good intentions behind having 2 places. I just can't come up with a reason as to even having 2.
It's, and my discussions with the administrator is, this is no additional cost to Winona County. That office is there, it's sitting empty, so we're saying, and I had that discussion with him. Are we talking about the funds that used to go to SWC coming to us? And I said, because that's not really saving, it's not saving much. I said,
Should be
we're trying to
reduced
efficiently
cost.
use what the taxpayers already doling out. The space is empty, and Winona County's not asking for the money that's going to,
So really, the full savings will be there from moving out of Lewis and.
Well, this is a benefit to our board, it's
Regardless.
actually a benefit to Olmsted and Wabash County. And even if it does come back at some point and there's a certain amount of office space charged, it still has to be approved by this board. It's not like they can just whimsically charge us whatever they want and then we have to foot the bill, because we can choose who our planning coordinator is and move them to another
it's a
location.
good thing for the taxpayer.
It's a good thing all the way around. It's not like Winona can just pick a number, you have to pay it, right? So,
Yeah.
any other discussion?
Yes, I have the check for or the payment for 2021 calendar year for rent.
Okay, so we'll have to modify that.
Well, I've got it prepared from last,
And so how much was that check for?
$2,831. That includes
But that's for
utilities.
this year.
That's for
To the end of the year.
2021.
Yeah. And that's the update, that's including the increase, or prorated increase.
Mhm.
So that catches us up for the year.
Right.
That's a clean way to do it.
Okay, so hearing no other discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Do we have to approve this
Aye.
one?
Didn't we already do that in the closed there?
Okay, I guess we did.
Yeah. Signify by saying aye.
Uh,
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Well, at least there's a bunch of time to figure out what to
Yeah.
do. It's, as hard as it is to do that, it's the cleaner way to do it. And it just is. And it's a tough one for me because, I mean, there's a definite loss to us, so, and we're already constricting our budget, but it's hard to argue. So. Okay, fiscal year 2022 Clean Water Fund proposal update.
Yes, at our last meeting, I had a resolution for submitting a Clean Water Fund grant. This was the same funding request that John Howard completed a proposal for. And so what I did is I submitted a erosion reduction project for the North Fork Whitewater. So this would apply to Olmsted SWCD and Wabasha County SWC for partners. And so I submitted that grant application. It was one that I had submitted 2 years ago, but did not get awarded. So I revamped it and worked with the budget a little bit more and resubmitted it. And so we'll find out, I think October, if it'll be funded for starting next year. So that's all I have for that. If you're looking for the
Okay.
application, I was gonna bring it and I forgot to
Okay.
print it out.
I'm thinking through trying to visualize.
Yeah.
All right, any discussion on that? None, we'll move on to E, surface water assessment grant update.
Okay, just giving you, we're almost done with that grant. We have monitoring to do it on the 25th next week. And then lake monitoring one time in September and then twice for the streams. So we're almost done. We continue to, and I'm going to say, we are having problems with shipping samples. We had to do a resampling in July because our E. coli samples, even when we shipped them UPS ground, which was supposed to be a lot faster, they were up arrows on the box. Evidently, it was tipped over, so all the ice melted and all the water seeped out, and so the samples arrived, but they were dry and warm. So we had to go and redo those all over again. So that's been 3 times now we've had to redo samples.
Where do they send those to?
R&B lab, they're up in Bloomington? No, yeah,
And the
But-
sample's sealed.
yes. The samples were intact, but the cooler, the water still
Keep it.
seeps out, you know. They were
Oh.
supposed to keep it upright and they tipped it.
There's no way to have a
Yeah.
airtight
No,
vacuum.
no,
pack to be cool.
they tipped it and they put them in boxes with up
How
arrows.
often do we do this?
3 times a month.
3 times.
Yeah, so September is our last month and next week is our last E. coli sampling. So once we get that out the door, that was the big thing, the E. coli. They're like a 30-hour holding time. And having samples arrive more than 2 days later was not working.
Well, so when I was mayor, like, correct me, I mean, I don't think back, that was a while ago, but we actually physically drove our samples to the
Yep.
lab because that
Yep.
was the best accurate way
And
we
that
could come
was-
up with it.
That was one thing that we considered, and the other thing I really wanted to do, especially for this end of the grant, the lab in Olmsted County in Rochester is certified
So that's where I was going.
to do E.
Do we need
coli.
to go
I wanted
here?
to drive them to Rochester. and
Because that will not take much time as
Yes.
mayor to do.
I pushed pretty hard for that, and because that lab is not certified for all the other parameters that are tested in this program, they were not on our authorized list of labs to work with. So that was, but when I do the final report, one of the questions they always ask is for what can be, you know, what were the issues, and then what problems, you know, what solutions.
How long does it take to get this, Sheila, to get these samples? How much time did we have?
It takes 4 hours to collect them all,
Okay, so we have 4 hours to collect them each time.
and then you bring it into the pack and mail in Winona, and they ship it out. And so we've been doing UPS ground, and it's been pretty good that they arrive
So
there
it
by
takes 4 hours to
noon the
get them,
next
let's
day.
say it takes an hour to do the pack and mail thing, plus the time you got there.
30 minutes.
But
Yeah.
so we have 4.5 hours in labor to do these things.
For 4 people.
4 hours for 4 people. Right, so it's actually 16 hours of labor
Right.
to do these.
Yep, I've done the math on that, Josh, and
And
it would have
you've
been
got
much better to drive them.
2
Yes.
hours of driving, it would take
Yeah.
only 1 in 8 times to fail,
Yep,
and it pays for itself.
yeah. But we were not allowed to bring him to the lab in Rochester. But that is one of the recommendations I'll have, is that please, for southeast Minnesota, we're called the shadow zone because anything shipped from here is not guaranteed.
So here's another way to look at this, because I'm assuming we're not the only ones doing this.
Nope.
Right, so can we maybe set up some sort of coordination when these are being done at the same time, brought to a location, that one location is bringing them to the cities, all of them at once, might have a van full of whatever it is, that would be the more efficient way, because then we've got the
Yeah.
shipping cost on this too, which I
Right.
can't imagine is cheap in those packed coolers. So if we look at what maybe 3 hours and some fuel cost versus shipping and having to go out and redo these every time, if we could coordinate with some other
Yeah.
whoever to get them to where they need to get, that would be
Yeah.
something I would challenge.
I-
That would be-
Well, for the surface water assessment grants, that ties in with the watershed approach, and they're not concentrated in one location. They're evenly
Right.
all throughout the
So who
states.
do we
That-
team up with?
Yeah, I don't know
Is there
who
somebody in
else.
the route that we can team up with?
Yeah.
that-
Yeah,
Does
and
that
from
make
what I
sense?
understand, statewide, this is a horrendous problem.
Oh,
with
yeah.
all the
That's why we physically would take ours and just
Yeah.
drive them to the lab,
Yeah.
because it just wasn't worth it. Yeah.
But my proposal is that for at least southeast Minnesota, let us bring at least the E. coli samples to the lab in Rochester.
Are they segregated that we could do that?
We are segregating them now so that they go the UPS ground, which is supposed to be faster than speed.
Well, what I'm saying is that, I mean, are we just, is there a reason why we would have to go to two different labs? That, are they taking the same, I have a lot, if I have a sample of water,
Right.
is that one lab just testing that one sample for both? Or why would we need the complexity of going to
Well,
places?
we were doing 2 different delivery systems because
Is the E.
speed-
coli done at a different time, is what I'm saying?
E. coli is the one that's the most time sensitive. They do them all at the same time, but that's the one that has a window of time where it has to get there. And if it doesn't get there in time, then they measure the temperature. If it's below 3 degrees, I think, then they'll say, okay, it arrived 2 hours later than the holding time, but it was still cold. So then they just flag that, saying, okay.
Got like a replication rate, I suppose,
Right,
or whatever.
yep,
with it.
yep. And
I
so-
would challenge to try to figure out who we can team up with.
Yeah,
and
I agree
taking
that
these samples
that makes the
around.
most sense because.
Because the labor cost, the shipping cost,
Mhm.
the resample cost, and the timing aspect of it, that's what we figured out. It just wasn't worth,
Yep,
just take them there and get them.
yep.
That would have something different, but it seems ridiculous.
Well, if you've got 16 hours to resample once, and you look at that and let's just say $20 an hour, there's a lot of cost there. Plus you get the shipping on top of it
Mhm.
every time we do this,
Yeah.
3 times a month. I can't, I mean, without running the numbers, even if it's a break even, this is the guaranteed thing. You know what I mean? Because it's not only that, but now you got the labor, you got the opportunity cost.
We're shipping them, to Rochester.
Bloomington.
Which is okay,
There
because it's on the
used to be a
south
lab in Rochester, or no?
There is a lab in Rochester, but they're
They're not
not
certified.
certified for all of the parameters that are tested under this program.
Do you know what parameters they are certified for? I mean, what would it,
Nitrates, E. coli. There was a list of 5 things, and 2 of them matched what we do with the surface water assessment.
The lab in Rochester is more municipality based, so it's
Mhm.
basically drinking water. And,
Yep.
you know, what the parameters like fluoride, chlorine, nitrates, you know, the typical TNN, total dissolve. But it doesn't probably have some of these things that the federal standard under, I'm assuming this grant, probably the federal standard has a different standard than what our local municipality.
And the cost
would
of
would
ship
it be worth for
could be
a
deducted
while
from
for
try the cost.
like Rochester to upgrade as it were?
That's not here, well, no, actually, is that the county or the city? It's the county,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
so that would be a county
The
deal.
Water Resources, they changed their name, Southeast Minnesota Water Resources Lab, I think is what it
But
called.
it's Olmsted County.
It's Olmsted County,
Yeah,
yes.
because most of the municipalities go with it.
Yeah.
So I would just challenge Sheila, can we find somebody to team up with and
Yeah,
look at the
and,
cost effectiveness of just driving?
yeah, and that's what I wanted to do. Kelly O'Hara is the person who's the coordinator for all of the surface water assessment grants in the state. And he says, at this point, he says, we're almost done with the program. Let's just get it done. But
If it continues.
if-
Right
yeah,
now,
if it,
it-
yeah, if we were doing this again next year, I would fight pretty hard to, let's make this make sense.
Yeah, I can see that's almost a no-brainer there. Okay, on to number 9, agency reports. Anything?
I just have one thing. When we were coming in this morning, one of the rangers said, well, today's the anniversary. And I said, what anniversary? He says, 14 years since the big flood.
Yeah.
That's today.
That was an interesting thing.
It was.
Huh. 14, age 17, so yeah, okay, anything else? If not, then motion to adjourn.
Adjourn.
I've done it first, but motion made by Lynn, you want the second?
Either way.
Yep, James.
Yep.
We'll go James and Lynn, how about that?
Okay.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Any motion? Okay.
All right.
Next
Thank you.
meeting, for the 21st. This says hold, not approve. Oh, no, this is.
Yeah, that was just the sticky note I stuck on it from last time.
Just one signature.
Yeah. Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, but this stack,
Oh, yeah, that's good.
just one.
That's good, thanks.
Now, how wide of a pattern do you get out of that little whirly bird feeder? That seed spreader? How
Yeah,
wide of a pattern?
sure.
That's really seed sensitive.
Yeah,
I
it is.
guess I'm taking out.
I think
Thank you,
I
Lynn.
coverage 15 feet.
Okay, that's not what I thought.
It appears,
And it's not way heavier than what's wrong, but it's,
other than we have 5 or 6 seeds in there, some of
goes farther.
it segregated a little quicker. It's all pretty general. It'll be interesting to see this fall. How it looks.